Welcome, everyone. This is Game Night, episode 9. A bit of a hiatus, but we are back in color, not black and white. With us once again is
now I'm
Ollie.
changing it to black and white. This podcast will be in black and white. No, just kidding.
Monochrome. With us, we have the pleasure of Ollie Barder joining us once again, but this is going to be one of our regular episodes where we cover topics as opposed to an interview this time. And I'm extremely happy that he could join us again live from Japan. Konnichiwa, Ollie Barder.
Well, yeah, it's more Ohio because it's in the morning. But yes,
Hello.
hello.
Oh yeah, we're in very, very different time zones.
Yes, it's kind of amazing this even works. But yeah.
I know, right? Yeah, it's. I mean, Thursday evening, Friday morning, it's perfect.
Yeah.
How are things over there?
Yeah, kind of weird stuff happening. Sunrise dropped a bit of experimental animation footage for a 40-year-old mecha anime called All About the Dumbine, and the Japanese internet has exploded. So Japanese Twitter has just gone completely crazy. So to kind of put it into perspective, Dumbine is kind of this fantasy alternate world mecha anime that's a bit like Game of Thrones with the body count in terms of all the politics. But in Japan, it's called isekai, which is basically you're transported to another world. Like a motocross motorbike rider is transported to the mythical world of Byston Well, and because he's from what is known as Upper Earth, his aura is very powerful, and it allows him to pilot these mecha that are kind of built from the husks of giant insects. So all the mecha look like nothing like anything else from any other. I mean, I've got toys of them around me, so I'm trying to find one that I could just show you. But and the designs for that were unbelievably kind of groundbreaking and amazing, and it was very popular back in the 80s. But nobody could make model kits and toys because the designs were too ethereal and complex, and the technology just wasn't there. Whereas in recent years, Bandai has just gone all in on doing amazing toys for the series because they now can. And those toys sell maybe, I think, even more than some of the Gundam stuff does, which completely blew Bandai's mind. So they've now got to the point where they're releasing designs of mecha that weren't even in the animated series. It's like stuff from a guidebook somewhere. And those are selling out. I mean, all the toys are selling out. And then there's this really interesting studio called Kamikaze Doga who do the animation for a new anime series called Sandland. And it's a mixture of 2D and 3D, but the 3D is made to look 2D. And they did this piece of 7-minute footage of Dumbine, and it's really good. And then within a day, it's had 500,000 views. Which in Japan is insane. That's off the charts, beyond bonkers. And then Japanese Twitter is oh my god, Dumbine! And so, but yeah, Dumbine. Actually, I'll show you. I mean, so
show me. But if anyone out there is interested in mecha and anime, Ollie's your guy.
Yeah. So this is the actual titular Dumbine. And it's kind of based on a beetle, actually, but lots of the mecha look like insects, basically.
Yeah.
And they've got giant insect wings, and the cockpit is actually in the middle. There we go. So it's that little thing there, and it's kind of cool because you can't see into the cockpit, but when they're in the cockpit in the anime, it's like a one-way glass they can see out. So it's and it's the size of a person is yay big to it. So these aren't very big mecha. But it's a very, very cool series. It's available on Blu-ray from Sentai Filmworks, the whole series. And I think they've got it on sale at the moment for a ridiculously low amount of money. It's a really, really good show. It's also done by the same writer and director who worked on the original Gundam, Yoshiyuki Tomino. It has mecha designs by a guy called Kazutaka Miyatake, who is one of the 4 founding members of Studio Nue, who is responsible for so much amazing stuff. And then later in the series, they have mecha designs by a guy called Yutaka Izubuchi, who is one of my favorite mecha designers ever, and is responsible for designing the most popular Gundam ever. So he's a really, really cool guy. So, the end of the series is absolutely amazing because I don't want to spoil it, but Yeah, it's like
Send me
really,
send me the link.
no.
DM me the link or whatever,
I
because I love anime. I don't have much time to watch much anymore, but I'm in. I have a quick question about the mech designs. How's like the cock region for it? Because if like Zone of the Enders, always
oh
like
right,
Kojima had great robot cocks. It just
right. Okay,
it
so
was
that's actually
very
that's
pronounced,
that's
very
actually Yoji
accentuated.
Shinkawa.
Yes,
Right.
yes.
So that is
So
probably
robot cocks. I
there
saw
are
your
no
faces when I started on that. I saw your faces. You're like, "What the fuck is this guy talking
no. I
about?"
know what you're talking about. Actually, wait a second. No, well, I've got it behind me.
You please tell me you're not going to show me your robot cock, Ollie.
That's exactly what I'm gonna do. So
And
here we are.
there we go.
So I mean, I'm not a huge fan of the Zone of the Enders games, but this is the Riobot Jeff T from Sentinel. It's like
Oh yeah,
the nicest action figure of it. But no, what you're talking about is the cockpit is here,
yeah,
right? Yeah.
yeah, the
So
cockpit.
it's literally a cockpit, right? But there's only one other. Well, there's maybe a few others, but there's one other one that I can think of that has that setup, and that's from an anime called Brain Powered, where the actual crotch opens up and there's like a hole in and that's where the pilot is. But normally for most mecha, it's in the chest. So with Gundam, it's in the chest. With Macross, it's basically in the chest.
Evangelion is in the back through the plug.
Yeah. I mean,
Back
because
in the
they're much bigger. But
Yeah.
generally with super robots, it gets more complicated because if they combine, then each one has a pilot. And so one's in the foot, one's in the leg,
That's right.
one's in the arm. But for real robots, it's generally in the chest. And the one thing I will say about Zone of the Enders is the mecha design by Yoji Shinkawa for those games is
incredible.
amazing. Is absolutely groundbreaking. It's just a shame that the games are not great.
I mean, I'm going to differ. The first one is a bit of a mess, even though it looks beautiful. Zone of the Enders 2 is like one of my favorite games. I think
So
it's
the problem with
incredible.
Zone of the Enders 2 is it's got the same problem as the first one functionally, and that's that the ranges are not linked. So the problem is that you have this analog dash, and you have two ranges of combat. Sorry, you have range combat and melee combat, and there's nothing really that stitches it together in a functional way, except for this really rather rubbish analog dash. Now, in things like Virtualon, Another Century's Episode, or even Armored Core, you have these boosting mechanics that kind of link the movement, so that the movement from getting from one range to another is actually quite involved. Like, you have to think about it. With Zone of the Enders, there's just none of that. So it's just kind of like, well, why bother with ranged? Just go to melee. And the reason why it is absolutely a problem, and they had to fix it in the second one, is because at the end of the second game, you unlock something called Zero Shift.
Yes.
And what it does is it just compresses the range combat to melee combat, and it's just gone. So that was their solution, which is fucking terrible. And it also kind of shows how fundamentally broken the game was, because they needed that as a fix. Because that's like I don't know, that's like when you see those like electrical things where like the fuse is gone and the guy just puts a spanner there, right? Like just to make sure the thing works, like just to make sure the circuit works. And that's basically what Zone of the Enders did. But with Virtualon, because Zone of the Enders was heavily inspired by Virtualon, and the Virtualon one basically... They had fixed vector dashes, and it was kind of like reverse tennis, because you had to kind of plan where the enemy was going to be 4 or 5 dashes in advance, and your shots would then connect. So that whole range stuff was actually really important. But the mecha design is absolutely amazing. I think Shinkawa actually supervised this toy, so it's absolutely spot on accurate. It's also like crazily well articulated. It doesn't open up the cockpit, sadly. That you can't open. So that's one thing. So yeah.
Eric,
Yeah.
This is also our co-host, Eric. He's here.
Hi. I'm here. I don't do a lot of the mecha stuff, so I'm just listening, learning.
Yeah.
I haven't played any of these games.
Anyway, let's move on to the other stuff that we need to talk about. The world is ending at the moment.
The world is always ending.
Yeah.
I'm just mad that there's, they're not going to give us the Redfall DLC that I've been waiting for so long.
Are you really that mad?
No. I thought Redfall was dreadful. And I think Arcane as a company has made some amazing games, but Redfall was not one of them.
We'll get there. How's the TV gig been going on?
The TV gig. Oh, the TV, writing about TV. I was like, did I get a TV gig? I'm like, did I finally make it? No. No, it's good. I've been watching a lot of old, like British police procedurals, and I don't know. I've got a BritBox subscription, and I've just been kind of enjoying that. Writing about shows that are like 8 or 10 years old, and whatever.
How's the traction on those going?
Not bad. Nobody else is writing about them, so you're the only game in town.
If you're interested in like really good British procedural drama, the Johnny Warwicker trilogy by David Hare is amazing. And it stars Bill Nye as kind of this retired intelligence analyst. The story, it's got like Ray Fiennes in it as well as like the evil British Prime Minister. It's amazingly well written. It's a really, really interesting. It's set over 3.
What's it called again?
The Johnny Warwicker trilogy, and Christopher Walken is in one of them as well. As well as what's her name? Anyway, doesn't matter. But that's really good. Another one by another lady called Abby Morgan called The Hour, which is kind of set in 1950s Britain, and it's kind of like this topical show that's kind of like trying to find out what's happening in British politics. That's amazingly well written. Another one by her, Abby Morgan, is called River, and that stars Stellan Skarsgård.
I'm watching River right now, actually.
It's absolutely amazing. She is
halfway through it.
Yeah, she's one of the best. Like, she's a Welsh writer. She's really good. They've got a new series with Benedict Cumberbatch coming to Netflix called Eric, I think.
Yeah, I've seen previews for that.
Yeah,
that's the same people.
Amazing.
Okay. Huh. I thought River so far has been fantastic. I mean, Stellan Skarsgård is
amazing.
Tremendous.
It's a fantastic idea for the series.
Oh,
as well.
Yeah, it's great. Not to spoil, we won't spoil it for anybody, but definitely that is something I'm going to write about soon because it's just phenomenal.
Yeah, no, my wife and I, we watch loads of this stuff. So
yeah,
I can tell.
Yeah, I just watched Line of Duty. I watched the whole 6 seasons.
Who's H? Who's H?
Yeah, who's H? H. Which I thought was the first 3 seasons were great, and then it slowly sort of grew until season 6, and then it just
did you watch the
jumped
Bodyguard?
off a cliff. Bodyguard was really, really good. I thought.
Yeah, that was
that's with what's his name from Game of Thrones, right?
Yeah, Richard.
I watched that. It was good.
Yeah, that's the same guy that Jed Mercurio that does both those shows.
When the Prime Minister started fingering herself, I mean, it started going on. Yeah,
it gets a little steamy.
A little seduction.
No, that was a good show. But yeah, I enjoyed Line of Duty. I'd had people tell me to watch that because it's got in the first season it's got Lenny James, who is in The Walking Dead. He plays Morgan in The Walking Dead and Fear the Walking Dead, and I hate that character. Character. So people are like, "What? Watch this show. He's really good in that." And he was great in that.
I have a great question. We all have them, but you just name it. Who is your most hated character in a TV show? Like one that you just think of that just pisses you off so much. I mean, I have mine if you want me to go, but I'll
go for it. Start us off.
Mine is E from Entourage.
Oh, never watched
Entourage. I fucking hate E. And the reason I hate E is because the way it's the worst casting, because the way he talks, he's Vinny Chase's equivalent. Like he is, oh, Vinny, we used to go girl for girl, I used to kick your ass. The dude is 5'5" nothing, and he's a ginger. It is the worst casting choice. He wasn't banging any chicks. None. 0 chicks. Okay? Vinny Chase is the man. And E just comes in and he talks like he's 6'2", jacked, banging 9s all the time. This guy wouldn't get anything. He's the worst casting choice ever.
What I can't understand is the
every scene in Entourage from season 3 on, he completely ruined. I fucking couldn't stand him. Anyway, go.
Wow.
What were you saying, Ollie?
I don't understand the American obsession with height. I don't understand why this is such.
Well, it isn't. It's just
he's Canadian.
I'm Canadian, yeah.
I know, but I don't get it because I see it a lot online. Is like when,
but it's just like when you're talking, when the character's talking, like he's gonna kick everyone's ass all the time, and this and that. I'm just like, okay, like you're a midget. I don't. Anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've never watched Entourage. It never really jumped out at me as a
long
one
time
of the
ago.
HBO.
I was into it. It's just that character always stuck with me. He was awful.
Yeah. Well, I already said Morgan from Walking Dead. He's one of them. He's up there.
Dead.
Maybe not the worst, but he's up there.
Ollie's about to name some random obscure Mac thing.
No, I'm thinking. I mean, what was it? I think it's like there are quite a few characters from The Expanse that really annoy me.
It's a
Mm.
show
I mean,
I've
they're
always
not.
wanted to watch.
The Expanse
only
is
read the books.
amazing, but like to be
Books are
fair, they're
great.
normally like characters that end up dying horribly, so it's kind of okay.
Well, it pays off.
It pays off. I mean, there's a payoff, so they make them annoying for a reason. But no, The Expanse is amazing, actually. Like I genuinely love that series. The only thing I will say about The Expanse is it is like the most 90s science fiction story you could possibly have. And like everybody is like perfectly placed at the right time for like in a novel I could see why that would be very appealing. But in a TV series it's just like I mean I still love it. I still think it's great. But like Holden is just like in the right place every time, and it's just like he is so, and the way that everything's kind of contrived, it is kind of That's I think the thing is I'd say it's like 90s American science fiction is very contrived. I think is what it is.
Did you read the books?
Yes, I have, and I think one of the reasons it worked so well is one of the two writers is actually on the series, and he's kind of like supervising the writing, doing the writing.
Yeah.
I think that's always, whenever the original writer is not involved in some kind of production capacity, bad things happen.
Yeah.
And I think you know this better than anyone with Game of Thrones, with like when George R.R. Martin was involved, oh my God, that was some of the
fantastic.
most amazing television ever.
Mm-hmm.
And also, like for me, like my favorite fantasy writer is Ursula Le Guin, and when she was involved in things like it's not Left Hand on, it's what was it? Oh God, there was a really great The Lathe of Heaven. That was it. So she worked on the Lathe of Heaven 80s kind of an adaptation, and it was so good. And then they did a new one without her, and it was rubbish. And then they did like
I didn't even know
the
they'd done
Earthsea
one.
stuff, and it was terrible because she wasn't involved.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think as long as you get the original writers involved in some capacity, and that's also why The Witcher sucks, and it's why they got rid of Cavill as well, because Cavill wanted to follow.
Because
the books.
Cavill clashed with them all the time. I mean,
he wanted to follow the books. He cares about the original. It's also what's happening to him on Warhammer. It's like he really cares about the original.
Yeah, and now the whole controversy, which I don't really.
But the thing is I don't mind that, because there are plenty of women in Warhammer. Like you've got like the Sisters of Battle and all this kind of stuff. I mean, really, really powerful women. But the Custodies have always been historically men.
Yeah, people don't have a problem with the women. It's now changing the
it's
lore
the change,
to fit women into where they weren't before, and then pretending like you shouldn't have an issue. I won't stand on ceremony and pretend like I know much about Warhammer at all, but just the very brief surface level stuff I've done, like we've always discussed here, there's no nuance. It's like you try to point out that it doesn't fit, then you just hate women, and it's just like, why do you even fucking bother? I'm not going to bother getting into this.
I mean, that's the thing that's really sad about the Warhammer thing is you're right. It's got nothing to do with the fact they're women. It's the fact that the lore, which is the thing with Warhammer lore, is it's so incredibly deep and complicated and rich,
and it's been around a long time,
right? And that's what makes it valuable, right? That's what Henry Cavill understood about The Witcher as well. It's the books that make it valuable. And you need to stick to that.
That's why you're adapting it in the first place.
That's why you're adapting it in the first place. I mean, and
otherwise,
to be fair,
make your own thing.
Yeah, and one of the reasons why I think also Dune worked like with Villeneuve was the fact that he loves the books, and he's really like, and also they had like I think some of the Herbert family were involved as well. So, it is, I think if you don't have that, you're screwed. And I think that's one of the reasons why The Expanse worked out so well, because they stuck to the books for the most part.
Yeah, you can't do everything.
They got rid of one of the main characters because, according to, he was a sex pest. But it doesn't really change it that much.
Oh, right. They had to get rid of one of the characters because of the actor.
Yeah,
but that was part of the series, which was unfortunate because he's a good character.
He was.
I only watched the first season of The Expanse, but I read all the books. And I'm going to try to get to
Thomas Jane in that is also excellent as like a space gumshoe. I love that. I love the fact that he's just this really kind of
they're like private or like detective.
The first few seasons of that are really special, and then it ends in a really kind of brutal way, but it all follows really nicely. It's like there's a real good line all the way through. And I'm curious to see how
it ends before the final 3 books in the series.
Yes, there's a massive time skip before
huge time jump.
So,
which really weirded me out, honestly, in the books. So
yeah, and
they needed to kind of end it before that, I think.
I think they might go back to it, but probably not after like 30 years. I think.
Yeah. When everyone's old, they just start filming in 3 decades, same cast.
What I think will probably happen is they'll come back in a decade or two, or maybe like, let's say 10 years from now, they'll probably do like the next 3 books, because like Jeff Bezos loves those books, and that was the reason why Amazon bought it after Sci-Fi dropped it. So I know like he would want to see the ending of the story. The ending of the story is amazing. So
it's good. Yeah. I didn't love what a big time jump it was, though. I'm not going to lie. That threw me off a little bit. Yeah. It felt like the characters for what they were actually doing in the books were a little too old. I think a 10-year jump would have been exactly more palatable. And I think that if they made that change in the series, I'd be totally fine with that. Yeah. That would see exactly. That's where there is a lot of room in adaptations to make changes that work, as long as you stay true to the fundamental nature of the story.
Yeah, but you need to understand that.
You have to understand.
The only way you understand like the tenets of that is by being like really knowledgeable about it.
Right, and of course you can't always have the author, because, like, for instance, Lord of the Rings, Tolkien had sort of kicked the bucket already, but Peter Jackson and his collaborators, I think, for the most part, did a really good job, especially compared to a lot of the stuff that is made now.
But I think the scouring of the Shire should have been left in, though.
Oh,
I agree. There's a lot of things
so much.
Like there's not perfect. There's a few things, and I just saw there's a report that the original team, they've signed on to make more officially now. Lord of the Rings.
This is making a new Gollum movie.
Yeah,
who is?
Andy Serkis is making.
Yes, I saw that. They've just come on. There's a big push now. But yeah, Peter Jackson, his writing partners, they've come on to shoot a series of new Middle-earth films. But yeah, the Scouring the Shire, I had an issue with Gandalf not using magic at all for the most part, at least offensively in the films. I know it was never explicitly stated other than when he was caught in a tree a couple times, but he is kind of a fucking wizard. Maybe rather than whacking guys with a pole, that you'd kind of use magic sometimes.
Why did they decide to do that? Was there any explanation of why
they had to come up with the beam of magic special effect that is now used in every movie with magic? You got to have one beam of magic hit another beam of magic, and the two beams of magic just kind of
like a Kamehameha wave. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like, what was the reason why they didn't do that in the movies?
You know what? I'm struggling with the reason, but I remember diving deep into it, and he did give a reason that I didn't accept at all. I thought it was nonsense, because when he at Gondor, when he waves the Nazgul away, he kind of uses like a light magic, right? So what's the difference? Like, he is this preeminent wizard, and I just don't understand, because when you take that all away, he's ultimately a very old man hitting massive trolls with a stick and a sword. You'd think he'd be using magic, but anyway, that's a Jason Rose gripe. I could go
that's one of the things that I always thought. And also, don't the elven blades kind of, because I know Sting glows blue in the movies, but they normally glow a color anyway.
Yes, they do.
And like
they glow more when orcs are around, right?
Yeah, but the King's Sword, doesn't that like glow white? I mean, because
you're right, though. I forget. It's been such a long time since I've read the books, but you're right. Yeah. They all have their own characteristics. And to me, that's important. When weapons have their identifying, when you spend 3 pages of exposition multiple times telling me about these weapons, and it's not just Lord of the Rings. There's many
work brilliantly in like those big battle sequences, because then you'd know
it's a signifier. Right. It's also the issue I had with Revenge of the Sith when Anakin turns and fights Obi-Wan. Why doesn't he have a red fucking lightsaber? They're both using blue lightsabers. It's stupid. Give him the red one. There's no differentiator. Anyway,
you know what? He made his own lightsaber yet?
Sorry, go ahead, Eric.
Well, had Anakin made his own lightsaber at that point?
He had a lightsaber. He had met the
Palpatine
and the Emperor. So the inference that a lot of things had happened behind the scenes.
Yeah, I love it when it all happens off screen. That's so.
Yeah, great. I mean, he shows up and he sells the blue. Like the best part of him, Anakin, I will stop you. You will try, and then he would have ignited the red one. It just would have made so much more sense in those shit fucking prequels. Right, but
I think with Gandalf, though, this was never a problem for me with the magic, because in the actual lore, Gandalf is forbidden from using his full power. He only has a very limited.
I think that's
limited
Gandalf
source
the
of
Grey,
power.
though.
Yes.
No, it's completely. It's just in general. The Istari are not allowed to use their power in Middle Earth. It's just they're only given a tiny little sliver of their full power.
Okay.
And so it
I
just
thought
wasn't.
when he
It's
came
really not
back
part of his character.
as Gandalf the White, he was, and the war was full bore. It's like, he's unshackled to a certain extent. I don't know.
Probably a little bit, but I still think it's like in general with Tolkien, the magic was something that was more
agree with
inferred.
you. I didn't expect him to go around just going pew,
because they do that in the Hobbit.
Like
in the Hobbit, they do that shit. They have more like magic, and it's dumb.
Yeah,
I mean, the Hobbit trilogy was bad.
The trilogy
just wasn't good.
Awful, but
it takes all that stuff that was like more subtext and more nuanced and subtle, and they just like blow it up in the Hobbit. Legolas running on air and shit, and just like,
like that?
I don't know, like it was dumb. It was.
You know what? One show I didn't have a lot of issues though with was Fallout.
Fallout was great.
Yeah, we can talk about game
stuff. Fallout. Yeah, I loved Fallout. I was so pleasantly surprised. I know a lot of people that are really big into Fallout lore had a lot of problems with it.
Yeah.
But I'm not big into Fallout lore, and I thought they did the actual universe and the tone and the sort of the Fallout vibe very, very well. And then they coupled it with a really compelling mystery and story with some cool like reveals and also great characters and actors casting, everything. I loved Lucy, right? Yeah. Lucy. I loved that she was like the chief protagonist, but they didn't just make her like a boss girl badass all the time. Like she had her badass moments, but mostly she was just a charming character, and she was so much fun to go on that adventure with. And that's something that so many shows forget about. Like you have to have characters who are enjoyable to spend time with, and then a story that kind of like that keeps you guessing, keeps you wondering like how what's going on in the third vault, what's going on with what's the backstory of the ghoul, and just from the very beginning right straight through to the end, I just enjoyed every minute of that show. So it was so much fun.
And like you, I am not a Fallout guy at all. To be honest, I don't even really like the games all that much. Every time I've tried to play them, I'm like, okay, well, this just doesn't. It's in the genre of this, but it doesn't look as good as this. Like, especially with Fallout 4, it just proved how far Bethesda was behind in the game that they played. They were just getting lapped at least once. But that's neither here nor there in terms of the show. I loved it, and I loved that it showed me before, or at least touched on the aspects that before. That's always one of my big issues with a lot of these end of the world and zombie apocalypse things and what have you, is they never seem all that concerned about how it happened or trying to solve it. It's just like these things.
That was integral in this. That was literally like the whole point of.
Yeah, and I like that. I get some stories. It's like they're just in it, and at that point, some random family can't fix or try to figure out. They don't have that luxury. Right. But in this, I really enjoyed it. I thought the show was fantastic. And like you said, Ella Purnell, not only is she's almost like ethereally, unnaturally beautiful. Like her eyes were very captivating.
Her eyes are so big.
And like okie dokie. That thing, like she was fantastic in it right from the get-go. And she captured the spirit of that contrast of a vault dweller with the Fallout world perfectly.
But she played the games.
Yes.
And she made a big thing when she got the role. She basically researched it by playing all the games.
Well, good for her.
I think from about Fallout 3-ish onwards.
Yeah. That's all you need. You don't need to play all the games.
She didn't play like 1 or 2 or anything like that. But she, like, there's an interview where she, like, when she got to put on the Vault Dweller's suit and when she got the, the Pip-Boy and everything, she was like, yay! So she, like, really, she got it, I think.
And that matters. And getting back to the Henry Cavill thing, it's like why doesn't Hollywood, I use Hollywood, but as
Hollywood hates
films are made everywhere, but I just use Hollywood as the greater narrative.
No, Hollywood is.
Why can they not figure out that the further you deviate from source materials, particularly in games, but books too, the further you deviate, and like let's just use games.
It's
the
game.
fans
This is
are
a very
there for the
specific
game.
problem.
The fans are there for the game. When you automatically and some of the narrative in the PR prior to the Fallout show was a little bit troubling, like how they weren't out to please the fans and stuff. When really the show was the exact opposite of that. It really was out
It
to
was.
give
The big
everything.
problem with
It
Hollywood
wasn't
is
just it wasn't just for that,
Right.
but it was for everything. But it's like the further you deviate from the source material, you're going to alienate your base, and then you're not going to capture your other people. But Fallout did such a wonderful job doing both,
Yeah.
and they had the budget
Yeah.
to match it, which mattered.
So the thing with Hollywood though is it's they hate. So they're very status obsessed. So and fans have no status basically. So they don't want to be seen pandering to people that have no status. They want to be pandering upwards, right? They're upwardly mobile.
Fair,
And
fair.
the
I get
other
it.
thing, and the other thing also with games, especially, is Hollywood has always had this kind of existential crisis when it comes to games because they're terrified that they think games is going to replace movies. Because when games overtook movies in terms of sales, that was when Hollywood started freaking out about games. And to be honest, much of the kind of the discourse and dialogue about how gaming is bad for you, and people who play games are like basement dwelling trolls.
Incest.
A lot of this stuff is actually coming from Hollywood because they're trying to discredit their competitor. It's a very
Sure.
old
I can
very
see
old
that.
strategy. And the whole problem with the Marvel stuff, the reason why that kind of worked is because Kevin Feige kind of managed to infiltrate Hollywood, and he's a massive comic book nerd, and that's why the Marvel stuff worked initially. But when it started getting too successful, obviously, then you start getting other people that want to kind of direct it, and then the whole third whatever what is it? Is it what
Phase
fa-
5
Phase
or whatever?
5.
whatever
Phase
whatever
4,
the
phase
phase?
5.
Well, the one with Eternals, which like nobody cares about.
4, I think.
Yeah,
Phase
I mean,
4.
basically, post Avengers Endgame, it just went to shit.
Yeah,
And it's
Shang-Chi, the shows, all
Yes.
that shit.
I mean, basically, a lot of
Guardians
that was to
is
do
still
with
pretty good, but
Yeah,
Yeah. But a
there's
lot of
still
that-
some stuff that's okay.
the Christmas
you know?
special was great.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, no, that's very true. That's very true. There was definitely a shift. It's also when they started putting everything on Disney Plus, doing too many shows. They just really they overextended themselves, and we've heard Disney say they're going to limit how many shows and movies they do per year now.
But this is also something to do with The Witcher as well, is because Cavill played a lot of the games, and he was really into the games, and he was being true to the original. But Hollywood fucking hates that.
Well, it's not just it's the writers. They actively they start like the reports are they found him annoying for like here is like one of the biggest stars. You're a fucking writer of 1 of 10, and you're trying to tell this guy who is literally responsible for this show existing.
Yeah.
Like,
well, there were similar
and this
things.
guy knows everything about it, and now he's
with
he's like, screw it, I'm not doing this anymore.
Well, did you? I mean, there were similar things with Jenna Ortega in Wednesday, where she was telling the writers basically like she wasn't going to do this stuff. Like she basically put her foot down and she wasn't going to do a love triangle, and they were really pissed at her. Like people were like the producers and stuff were not happy with her, but they couldn't do anything because she is literally too important. Like with Cavill, I think like they thought they got pretty arrogant and they thought, well, we don't really need him for this. Well, first of all, Witcher is not nearly as big of a hit as Wednesday. But yeah, I think
the first season was quite big, but and then the audience it wasn't touching. What I get that it doesn't have the crossover demographic. But if you look at even the budget for Witcher season 1 was limited. Like remember the dragon? It's just like there's no money behind it, but the drop off
better story still.
But the season 3 is just abysmal. The ratings, and that's because Henry Cavill's barely in it. Like. He's in it for like 25% of the show, and then he gets his ass kicked for the most. I don't know. It's awful, but sorry,
it was very poorly written. No, it's fine. No, I think there's like a lot of different things at play with where we've seen media, entertainment go. And that's what I think. That's one reason why Fallout was such a pleasant surprise was because there wasn't any of that stuff in there. Like it didn't feel preachy. It didn't feel messagey. It didn't feel like it still manages to be very diverse, and it has what you would expect from a futuristic show. But it all felt very natural, and that was such a nice.
What I liked about
change.
Ella Pennell did a really great job of the Lucy, and she was really, really into it. And it kind of works because everything kind of is like pivots around her.
Right.
What I thought was great about Walter Goggins is he literally came in like knowing nothing about
Yeah.
Fallout, but kind of knew what the character was from like, he's like this nomadic cowboy as the ghoul. And then obviously he kind of, I think he's kind of like the other anchor to it as well, because he's kind of, but he has one of the best game lines in the show, which he's talking about when they say, well, you know, the first golden rule of the, you know, the real world is don't get sidetracked with some bullshit quest kind of thing. Which I thought was like, yes, I feel attacked, but that's awesome.
No, that was great.
And it was like, he was the perfect guy to say that. And, but yeah,
he's just so great though. Yeah. I mean, he's just fantastic in everything he does. And, you know, I wish I was half as cool as him. You know, he did such a great job as the Ghoul. And yeah, I saw an interview with him talking about how he hadn't played the games, but he's such a pro. Like, you know, it's fine. You're like, you don't have to have played the games to be an actor.
The Ghoul was kind of this amalgamation of all these different cowboy sort of tropes.
The spaghetti western type aspect.
Right. And
but it linked him to the past because he was playing those things as an actor. And then it's like this three-way thing that all works together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Carl McLaughlin was also surprisingly interesting and good as well, I thought.
Who?
Was it Carl McLaughlin, the father?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Kyle McLaughlin. Yeah, he, I mean, he wasn't in it a lot, but he was such a great, surprising character. When you figure out, you know, because like in the first episode, there's a twist, right? The other vault is not the vault; it's a bunch of bandits and stuff, right? And but then, you know, they take the father away, and her whole quest is to find him. But then there's the next twist, which is that he is definitely not a good guy. And I'm sorry for spoiling this, but it's been out for weeks now. And I just love how they toy with your sympathies so effectively there, especially using an actor like Kyle MacLachlan, who, you know, so many people have you know, fondness for from like Twin Peaks and stuff.
Yeah, and he's set up as this kind of like, you know, goody two shoes, good guy.
Yeah, like,
and he fits,
you know, the Ned Stark guy. You know?
And then to have the twist on that, I think because of who he is and the way that he does roles, I think it works really well.
I like Fallout works because of the juxtaposition of that 50s innocence and you know, gee golly gosh sort of thing, and then with the clash of the real world, it's just, truth be told, it is a recipe for success as old as time. You can use that in almost any capacity, and it's almost always going to work. But to your point earlier about the writing, when you see a name like Jonathan Nolan attached to it, you know, like that's his vision's going to be pushed through. No one's going to fuck with him to do something different than what he wants to do, unlike like the Witcher show.
I think what is good about, in this instance, it wasn't so much about Nolan. It's because they didn't mess too much with the.
I agree with you.
I think because he was in charge, and because he wanted to, you know, well, not in charge, but because someone like him was on the production, and they were very clear about, no, this needs to be like, you know, this needs to come from the games. I think because having someone like that as like this kind of wall almost, it stopped a lot of other interference.
Well, sure. I mean, it's going to run.
He wasn't showrunner, but he
it's running through.
But he helps. I mean,
it's the similar thing with Shogun that we were talking about. Is like I think one of the reasons that worked so well is because Sanada was one of the producers on the show. So he could kind of stop a lot of unnecessary interference. That's basically like the job of a good producer, is just to stop people interfering, and more importantly, not to interfere as well.
That's what I say about managers in general. A good manager lets the people doing the work get the job done. The bad manager is constantly interfering with them, making their lives hard.
Talking about
we're not done with the Fallout talk, but that would be a fantastic segue.
This is a good segue to Microsoft.
Really would. But
Microsoft and Sony, what have they been doing recently?
Fallout is just fantastic. I loved it. I love that we're going to get more of it. Like the Brotherhood of the Steel shit was great. I kind of want to see like a also. So. Sorry, go ahead, Eric. Sorry.
No, I was just saying Tim Kaine loved it also. You know, so that says something.
Yeah. Yes. You know, I agree. You know, and that's not enough lip service and credit is given to Tim. It's treated like Todd Howard's baby all the time, and really all this stuff really comes from Tim. Like Todd massaged some of it, but most of it just was already there when they bought it.
Yeah.
So everyone talks about Todd Howard, this and that, but Tim was there.
Yeah. Yeah. Or do we want to? Let's hop into
segue. I mean, shitty executives.
We're segging into. Okay, so yeah, we have Sony on the one hand with one of the most enormous unforced errors of recent memory.
Are we going to couple these together?
Let's start with Sony.
So.
And then
let's go in.
Sony only has one thing, and then we'll go to Microsoft, which has several. They decided that they wanted to show the world that they had no clue what PC gamers are like. And they did not understand the foe that they were trying to vanquish by forcing Steam users.
Because it pissed off the PlayStation gamers as well.
Sure, but it especially pissed off players on Steam, where it went from like a very positive review score on Steam to overwhelmingly negative in 2 days. But yeah, they wanted, so for those people who have been living in a cave, Sony wanted to get everyone to sign up, everyone who is playing Helldivers 2 on Steam, to link their PSN accounts. And the problem with that is that many players on Steam don't have PSN accounts. A whole lot more can't even make PlayStation Network accounts because they live in one of the 177 countries that doesn't have a PlayStation Network access. And within 3 days, there was such massive uproar that Sony backpedaled and changed their mind. I did encounter a few people on social media who were like, "It's for security," and
there is one good point to what happened with the PSN Steam problem, because especially at least on the Asian side, it's something I see a lot. There are a lot of Chinese hackers and cheaters. And the problem, those people are on Steam, but because there's crossplay, they affect people on PlayStation. Now, the problem is that when people complain on PSN, that doesn't really do anything because you have to go to Valve. And so Sony has to go to Valve and then basically say, we need to ban this person. And then Valve has their own process.
Right.
One of the arguments I heard, which is actually I get, is that if it is a PSN account linkage, then if a PlayStation, someone complains, they can fix the problem immediately.
Right.
But to be honest, they need to find a better way to fix cheating.
Sorry, I'm pouring water from one bottle.
They need to find a better way to fix that kind of cheating hacking problem than basically forcing people to join PSN. And again, like you said, a lot of countries in the world don't have PSN.
And that's really the biggest problem. If everyone in the world could have signed up for a PSN account, well, then it just becomes kind of a big hassle, and that's not that big of a deal. Yeah. Like, whatever, okay, that sucks. Like, and really the other thing, the real problem is that they did this months after the game was already out, and people had already bought it and put hours and hours of time into it, and then suddenly all these people are no longer going to have access to it, which is just, it's just terrible from a PR perspective. It just, and Helldivers 2 has gotten such great feedback. Like, people love that game, and it's such an enthusiastic community, and to take that enthusiasm and not realize how much you are screwing yourself over. I honestly couldn't believe that.
So the thing
even
that
Sony, which seems pretty
really interesting about it is, to my mind, talking of crappy executives, it really, really smacks of something that Jim Ryan would come up with, because the way that he thinks is a very old school British marketing kind of guy, and he doesn't really kind of think about. He's always about trying to capture people. He's always about, like, he hates retro games. He's not really interested in the gaming side of it. He's more interested in the graphics. He's more, he's very much like this old school, like, trying to kind of trick people into getting stuff. He's kind of like the polar opposite of Andrew House. And Andrew House, like, for whatever faults he may have had, he did a good job with the PlayStation 4. And also, he kind of understood the kind of, you need Japanese developers as well as international ones. And also, he spoke Japanese, which, if you're going to be the CEO of PlayStation, the head of PlayStation, you need to be able to speak Japanese. Jim Ryan can't speak anything.
Seems like a good skill to have.
But I'm not running Sony. I'm not running PlayStation, sorry. But no, a lot of this stuff with Helldivers really, really smacks of Jim Ryan. And also because Jim Ryan is one of those guys that kind of would look at what Microsoft was doing with Game Pass, which doesn't even work anyway, and then and then say, well, yeah, we need to do PSN, but everything needs to be PSN. We need to lock people into PSN. We need to capture people into PSN. All of this really, really stinks of Jim Ryan.
And the other thing that's funny about this,
he's going, basically, he's not.
That's a good thing. But what strikes me about this also, though, is when we talk about Chinese hackers and all this, that I get it, but like this is not a PvP game either.
Yeah, but
it's a PvE game.
So to be fair, though, the stuff that the hackers do ruins it for everyone.
Well, sure, but it's still
they all like the whole point of working cooperatively and getting cool stuff like loot and everything is just ruined by these guys because they just destroy all of the co-op. So they just
you could just put China in a different.
Yes, unfortunately, that's not how. I also think that's a problem with Steam. Like you can't. So one of the problems I think on previous games I've worked on, that when you release a game like that, it's released server-wise globally, so you can't regionalize the servers in that way.
Turn off crossplay.
Yeah,
I mean that's the next step.
Yeah, to be honest, that's probably the logical solution to the problem.
Can I play a bit of a devil's advocate?
What?
On this?
I'm sure.
Like, I find PC gamers just to be a bit of a babies. And I know people are getting really pissed off. But, like, anything that deviates from what exactly they want, they lose their shit.
But 177 countries, we're not going to be able to play the game that they purchased.
I mean,
I don't think that's babies. You're not wrong, but I found most of the loudest voices weren't affected by any of this. And I find it extremely hard to believe that they actually really
solidarity. Yeah, you have to have solidarity.
I don't. I just think a lot of people wanted to be pissed off about something. And listen, I don't even think they're wrong about it. But to review bomb a game that has done everything right.
It worked.
It did. You're not wrong. You're not wrong. But I'm just like, are we this? But it's not even just this. Like PC gamers, there's other games that require sign-ins for anything. Like every Xbox game has a separate sign-in. And then you get PC gamers, if it's on Epic, they're pissed. If it's on another launcher, they're pissed. If it's not just exactly curtailed to what they want all the time, agree with that. They're fucking pissed all the time. They're like this. They're like the girlfriend that you can't.
Have you dealt with Uplay? I
think I kind of agree with a bit of that.
I kind of just want to piss like people off. Like I saw it all and I was like, I get the issue, but I'm like, you guys are kind of fucking babies. Like,
but the thing that I find really interesting is the people that, because it was such like a fundamental issue of like denying people ability to play games. What I found really interesting was watching people that weren't really PC gamers get involved.
Right.
And actually say, no, they're right. And I think that's one of the reasons why it got fixed so quickly. Because if it was just the PC side of this, then it wouldn't have been quite as easy, I don't think. But I noticed a lot of console gamers, like at least on my Twitter timeline. But again, I'm in Japan, so I'm seeing a different time, because I'm in a different time zone, so I see different, dialogue between different
culture.
And also it's much more Asian centric, obviously. But I saw a lot of those kind of weighing in very like openly and heavily, like, no, this is wrong. You shouldn't have to join PSN if you're playing this on PC. And this was coming from the PlayStation side. So I thought that was really encouraging.
I mean, I say all this to say that I'm glad it's fixed. The right decision was made. But I don't understand the issue with signing into PSN, other than the fact that it's banned from other companies. They need to work, or countries, I'm sorry. That they need to fix that. But many other PC games, especially from their direct competitor, Xbox or whatever.
But almost, I would say that 99.9999% of those, when you bought the game, you had to do that.
So, whereas
with Helldivers 2, it came several months later.
So the issue
that's a pretty big difference.
I guess the argument was, and I'm not going to go to bat for this. I'm just going to. This will be my last thing playing devil's advocate. Supposedly on Helldivers 2, the PSN sign was always going to be required, but there was an issue at launch in implementing this. Listen. I might be quoting this wrong, but that's the way I read it, okay? Mm-hmm. And it was instituted later. Doesn't make it right. It's just they did it later. It was always supposed to be there. But I'm glad it's fixed. Everyone should be able to play this game.
But I think
the
what
bulk
they
of
tried to do is
consumers
they
probably
tried to
wouldn't
actually
know
kind of
that.
offset it, the developer side of it.
Yeah.
And that's what caught them out. To be honest, to their credit, the guys at Arrowhead have been really open about saying,
Yeah.
we are not blameless in this.
Right.
And we are.
Am I wrong? And the community manager supposedly got fired.
Okay,
No.
so on a guy called Spitz was basically telling people to review bomb the game, and he got fired for that.
Yeah,
I thought he almost got fired, but didn't.
No, he did get fired.
No,
He
he
did get fired.
eventually did, Eric. Yeah,
Okay.
So he almost did, and then he did.
and then he
Oh,
did.
and then he did. Okay. Well, probably not a good idea to say that, although
But
I
to be
thought it was
honest,
kind of
I
funny.
mean, I actually super respect that. So
Yeah, no,
You can be
I
my
do.
wingman anytime.
yeah,
Yeah, I just think that, like, I don't think that this would have been a controversy at all if in the very beginning people
Right.
had seen up front,
because
you need to do
Ubisoft
this.
games do this, or they used to do this, where you have
A lot
to
of
sign
games
up to
do it.
Ubisoft
Yeah.
stuff.
But then all those people, then the game, wouldn't have been able to be sold in the first place in all those countries. What it feels like they did was like, we're going to go sell this to a bunch of people, and then we're going to sucker them because, like, they're not going to be able to keep playing it,
Mm.
And that's just bad. That's just
Yes.
bad PR right there. And I think that you trade a lot of goodwill for very little gain. And I do agree that there's, when it comes to cheating and all that, that's just a problem with so many games.
Mm.
And finding a way to deal with that makes sense. And but I think that if the only way to really do that at this point is maybe here's a solution: if you want to play crossplay, you have to have a PSN account.
Fair enough.
Boom.
Fair enough.
Otherwise, crossplay is turned off. You can only play with PC or other people that have PSN accounts. So that would be one
think
solution.
it's as sinister as you said, Eric. I mean, it may be. Well, I think a lot of this Helldivers 2 stuff with Sony is them playing catch up. They didn't think this was going to be a successful game. They put very little behind it.
Yeah.
It's a massively surprise hit to Sony, and I think at this point they kind of don't really know exactly what to do with it, which is weird. They should. This again, failure of management. They're failing to success at this point, but they should have been harnessing everything from the get-go and just going full bore with it in terms of marketing, whatever. Because even now, it's like in the top 5 of sales every month, and I think like the last 2 months it was rising. It's like I don't understand how you, as an executive, and when software is your push, you can't just harness this thing that is a surprise hit, because they were developing it for like 8 years, something like that. It clearly had
that was also
issues.
insane. Like,
but it's like I think they kind of let it out there in a way to die, because even in a lot of their live service pushes, PlayStation wasn't really like, here's Helldivers, boom, boom, boom. It wasn't like that. It was like it's kind of here in the shuffle. They didn't know what they had on their hands, and a lot of gamers didn't know what was coming, and they have it, and it's wildly successful. And Sony despite their best efforts, it has continued to succeed. I'll just put it that way.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's nefarious, like I'm going to sell it to these countries and then fuck them in the back end. I think it was
no, but it doesn't matter if it is or not.
Extremely
successful. It feels that way.
It does. You're right, but I think it's like,
and especially if you bought the game.
Let's capitalize by implementing PSN now. And then they don't have the forethought. I think a lot of people give too much credit to these executives. Like they know what the fuck they're talking about.
No. They're completely out of touch. They live in a bubble.
100%. Like, especially in gaming.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think most of these people have any fucking clue about the business. I really don't.
I mean,
and I'm sick of people saying, like, sorry, Ollie, I'll let you go in a sec. I hear this all the time when people criticize executives, like, who am I? I mean, they definitely have forgotten more about the industry than I have, but I'm going to give this commentary. No, I don't think these people know a lot about the business, quite frankly. They just don't.
I mean, my tenure in publishing is
obviously a lot
absolutely true, is that the management are completely out of their depth. They don't. It's like being at a literary publisher that publishes books and none of the management can read. That is the equivalent of the level of quality of people in, or was in, games publishing. And that's also true of first-party platform holders as well, especially, like the big ones like Microsoft. Microsoft were especially bad. But basically, like, they're completely out of their depth. They live in a bubble. They don't understand the medium. One of the big problems of gaming is because it's so popular and because it makes so much money, it cushions a lot of
It
the
covers
rot.
their mistakes. I completely agree with you. Yeah.
And more importantly, they never have to be accountable.
No.
Because 90% of the time they're making money and they don't do anything. And it's not them. So, but they get all the credit, which is just like, no.
And they fail
Yeah.
upwards. The
Yes,
whole
it is.
Don
That is
Matrick
also
thing, and it
yes.
keep going. Let's pivot
Yeah.
to the Xbox thing. I mean, I have so many thoughts, but Eric, you paint the picture here.
Well, I was thinking of other wildly surprising successful games, and I couldn't help but think of Hi-Fi Rush.
That wasn't successful, though. That was the thing.
Well,
That
I mean,
they
it was
was
said
successful.
they said it hit every metric they had planned for a successful game. And
And it got a
the
lot of
only thing
critical
I'll
buzz.
say is
Isn't that a success?
they spent no money marketing this game, none. They didn't try to promote it in any way. It has success in spite of them, like Helldivers do in a lot of different
So
ways.
this is the thing that Hi-Fi Rush is a weird one because it was a Game Pass game. So the metrics, we have to trust what Microsoft tell us. From what I understand, from what I've heard from various different people, is it did okay, but it was not a runaway success.
And yeah, I agree with you. From what I read,
It
it
was
wasn't charting huge. And also,
no.
you have to say they sold
So
it for $40.
what I understood is that they pitched it as this runaway success. Microsoft did, and then it sort of became the darling of the gaming press. And then the gaming press kind of created this virtuous loop of saying how wonderful it was. I thought it was okay. I didn't think it was that good. I mean, it looked nice, but
There's always an indie game every year that the gaming press latches on to.
right. So that was kind of what it was, but I don't think it was anywhere near as successful as Microsoft made out. And the fact that they closed down Tango Gameworks is kind of proof of the fact that it didn't actually perform like they thought it would have done.
So let's paint the broader picture.
But I'm wondering here real quick if Game Pass doesn't just constantly muddy the waters when we're talking about this, because what is even successful if a bunch of people on Game Pass are already they already subscribe and then they play the game. So the
problem with Game Pass is a fundamental numerical one, which is it uses or tries to use the Netflix model of subscribers.
Right.
But the problem with that is, unlike Netflix, not everyone that has an Xbox doesn't necessarily have Game Pass, but everyone that uses Netflix has to have a subscription. So the problem is you're using only a smaller percentage of the people that are using the framework of your platform. And the number of people that subscribed to Game Pass was nowhere near enough to make it financially viable to pay for the games that they're doing. The current discussion that Microsoft is now having about the latest Call of Duty is whether to release it on Game Pass, because
because they know they're going to get
be
a price on it.
They will lose an enormous amount of money if they do that. So
the fact they really shouldn't. They should just give away some perks to Game Pass. Well, I mean, obviously with Call of Duty, it's a huge seller. They should never give that away for free. They should give away like the battle pass.
It's the same with Starfield as well. They lost money on Starfield because they made it free and available.
And I want to go further. Like Sony's experiment for this equivalent was when they put Horizon Forbidden West on PSN Plus. Their experiment was what they lost. They lost over $100 million by putting it on PSN Plus. That tells you.
Yes. So the thing you need to look at Microsoft is always trying to find shortcuts to beat Sony, right? They're always trying to look for the killer app. It used to be AAA games, then it was Xbox Live, then it's now, turning the Xbox One into a television. Then they're always trying to find a shortcut.
Now it's Game Pass.
And now it's Game Pass. And always the kind of the acid test for that is if anyone else picks it. Because normally, if it's something successful, every other game company is going to do it. So with Xbox Live, nobody else did it because it was unbelievably expensive to run. I heard something like it was 10 times more expensive per user than the subscription that people paid for to make the servers run. Which is why when the Xbox 360 came to the end of its cycle, it only broke even, which is insane because they should have made an absolute ton of money from all the games that sold. Yeah. Anyway, so that is just... So the fact that Sony did that once and it didn't work shows that Game Pass doesn't work. It's like, if another business does it and it's successful, then yes, that business model works. It just, the way that Microsoft are trying to do this walled garden to try and hide what's really happening, Like,
Yeah.
what is successful, what isn't successful. We just have to take their word
So
for
let's
it.
paint. We're into the weeds here, but let's paint the picture just real quick for people that don't know. Xbox just announced the closure of Arcane Austin, Tango Gameworks, and a few lesser studios here. And this is on the heels of 1,900 people
Masses of
being laid
layoffs.
off.
Yeah.
And from
Huge
the
layoffs.
sounds of it, this isn't the end of it.
No.
And at this point, I think you really have to ask the question of if you are, for instance, I mean, we're going to talk. Hellblade 2 is their big, like a massive game for them. They championed Ninja Theory forever, and I'm going to get into all this in a bit. I have so much to say, and I've been pulling my punches on Xbox for a long time. I've really been trepidatious about it, but I'm not going to be that way anymore. But Hellblade 2 comes out in 14 days, in 2 weeks. No one knows that this game. They haven't talked about it. They haven't marketed it. They haven't done anything. Like, how can any of their studios at this point feel safe in terms of what they're making? Are like Machine Games, any of these people? Like, are they on the chopping blocks next? How do we know? Like, why have a studio like Initiative, who is supposedly their quadruple fucking A studio that they've championed, that has pissed away millions and millions of dollars and produced exactly zero? They have produced nothing. Perfect Dark is supposedly still in a disaster of a state. It's fucking Perfect Dark. Like, how hard is it to develop? It's been like a decade. How can you
It's
do
because
this?
it's being
It doesn't make any
being
sense.
interfered with. That's the problem. That
But
is
it's like,
all it
why is this? Like, I'm not saying other studios don't have development issues, but this is an Xbox issue through and through. All their games seem to have this mark lately, at least in the last generation and a half. This happens all the time. And it's like, why is this happening? You can only point to management. And
It
I
is.
wrote a piece last year, April 2023. It was for Xbox. The Phil Spencer era is over.
Mm.
And I didn't care what it brought on. I love this shit. I'll argue with a fucking toaster. But it's like, and I fully believed it and I backed it up. And it is more true today. And it's not just Phil, it's Matt Booty. You look at his statements in terms of the hypocrisy of it all. The closure of Tango Gameworks, everything they said about Japan, and Ollie, I'm glad we have you here for this. Like they said, Tango is our investment. They visited them. Japan is our next thing, blah, blah, blah. We're not giving up. They close it. They're done. I mean, they were already done in Japan.
But the problem
But
with
they're
Tango
now
Gameworks is a lot of the Japanese creative talent.
well,
left.
and now the reports are coming out that Shinji Mikami, when he left, he took pretty much the entire team.
You did.
And I like, why did he do that? Because he knew what was going to happen.
Yeah.
And do a lot of these teams know what's going to happen?
So
Probably.
the thing is like what's probably I think most Japanese developers are probably safe. I think the reason why Tango was kind of exposed was because basically it's owned by an American company, so they were likely going to get shut down. But yeah, no, they left. But the only thing that I will say about Matt Booty is that he has finally started to understand and try to correct the AAA overcompensation, which I've been writing about for ages. The budget problem, and that is the result. This is the cause of all the layoffs that we're seeing right now, is that basically most of these games have like a 7-8 year development cycle, like Helldivers 2, and basically, we're coming to the end of that cycle with a lot of these studios.
Can I interject one sec, Ollie?
Yeah.
And I don't disagree with your point. I'm with you on the budget issue, but my only thing is that Matt Booty is different because the games he's been shepherding don't result in good games.
But this is the point.
And like the other ones, the budget issues are still a problem across the board on PlayStation. It's an issue that's going to continue to persist. The layoffs, the overhiring, blah blah blah. But at least there's results of good games on the other end.
But
on Xbox, they're not even getting the good game aspect.
But the thing is back in the day when Phil Spencer was doing it, he was before the result of the cycle that he started. So you're seeing the result of success from someone behind him, because of the huge long dev cycles now. So attributing success to someone like Spencer when actually it was people 5-10 years before him that actually set it all up is the wrong thing. What's interesting about Matt Booty now is that he was following through on the previous line of business, which was big budget AAA, invest heavily, get big results. That has never been the case across games in its entire history. It's a very, very small proportion of games that are what I would call AAA. And they naturally exist, but they're generally quite rare. The main bulk of what the games industry used to have, which was I used to call mid-tier, which is now being called weirdly AA. But basically, it's basically this kind of middle ground of the budget's not too big, but it's big enough to try out something functionally interesting. Because the problem with indie games is you're limited by the scope and the amount of money and the investment and the people you have to make something that's functionally varied, which is why you see a lot of copycat Metroidvania platformer kind of indie games, because that's what they can afford to make. So when you get to this budget, which is kind of in this nice middle zone, and the problem with Microsoft is they hollowed all of that out in America about 15, 20 years ago, and then they consolidated a lot of that talent into mega studios, or they forced studios like that to form. And obviously those studios are now kind of collapsing because the business model never worked, but because it takes such a long time for the result of that business model to actually come to fruition, we're only seeing that now. Which is why I was warning about this back in 2015, because look, this is going to be a huge problem 8 years from now. And the scary thing about the layoffs is all the people that are being laid off, especially in the States, are a lot of the most experienced and capable people that have all the institutional knowledge because they are paid the most. And those are the ones that the dumb management go, oh yeah, he gets paid too much, get rid of him or her. And they're getting rid of all of this kind of massive knowledge base that kind of props up the structure of the entire games industry. And in doing so, the next 5 years are terrifying because most of these people now are like my age, in their 40s and 50s, and they're going, why am I bothering with video games?
Sure.
I'm just going to do something else now because it's bullshit.
Eric, you jump in. Like, what do you, how do you see this?
Who, me?
No, Eric.
Well, I think that there's only a small slice of the gaming market that can go to real, true AAA games like Call of Duty. I think that's what Activision has put together over the years is a AAA studio. We'll call it one studio. It's multiple studios, obviously, but they can put out a game every year. So unlike Rockstar with GTA, which comes out with a new game every 10 years maybe, or Bethesda with a new game every 5 years or whatever. Like these other big AAA studios are coming out with games once in a while. Call of Duty comes out every year. So there's really not that many there's not many studios that can do that. There's not that many, and I do think that if they put Call of Duty on Game Pass, they run the real risk of destroying it. And that would be a monumental fuck up. Microsoft has fucked up a lot of companies, but if they fuck up Activision, that's
a whole other level.
Like that's just on a whole. Yeah, exactly. I guess Microsoft hasn't fucked up Minecraft completely, so that's something. But I don't know.
It's too small a game to fuck it up. That's the problem.
Right. I think that what you're saying about Matt Booty's acknowledging in his statement that they need smaller games that what did he say exactly? He said,
but it's my point is, you know what? I'm just gonna let you finish.
Thank you. We need smaller games that give us prestige and awards. That's just a very small snippet of whatever I'm sure he was going on about. But there. I mean, there's that's true. I mean, I think that like what Ollie's saying is that the industry needs more sustainable game development, and that means you can't have all these huge, enormously expensive games, especially because not all of, like you're saying, like all these companies are not necessarily kitted out to do that successfully. So you get a lot of very expensive projects that are canceled. And you get a lot of layoffs and you get a lot of studio closures. And, like I said, like Activision is one of the exceptions there. And, but even, you even look at the other wing of Activision, Blizzard, and, their content pipeline is much, much slower. You get a new Blizzard game every once in a blue moon, basically. It's the industry. I don't know. Like it feels like a lot of reckoning is happening, I suppose, and a lot of, but whether that will
none
lead
of the people
to,
that make those decisions are being
right are going to right, just like in government, just like in banking, just like in every other sector where we see a lot of people suffering for poor decisions made by the people at the top, they get their golden parachutes, they get their, they fail upward, and everybody else loses their jobs, and games are canceled, and yada yada yada. So it's grim. I don't know, it's grim, and it's like I don't know where it goes, honestly. Hopefully not all this talent just leaves the industry and goes and does something else, but you see these other studios forming.
Yeah, but that's the problem I'm seeing, is that not a lot of that investment is being. People aren't investing in these new studios.
Yeah, I mean it's
the venture capital is definitely dried up in terms of that way. So unless you're self-funded in some capacity, but like Matt Booty's thing, it's funny because the hypocrisy is widespread. Your statement about this investing in smaller games is accurate. He did say that, but it's like Hi-Fi Rush is that smaller game. I mean, yes, it was in development. Well, it was in development, but I mean, it's like the price point was in the smaller game vicinity. So I guess to what you want. But then in his note of the studio cancellations, Ollie, was they are closing the studios to focus on their core projects, which just shows they're reinvesting. Like their focus is going to be the Activision thing. Call of Duty, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, so it runs contrast to the comment on the small studio thing versus what they want to do in terms of a big picture thing. Yeah. And I just can't understand because, like I mentioned an issue, but even 343 has handed the keys to their biggest studio, and they've done nothing but fumble fuck this thing until the cows come home. And I just,
a lot of that was management, to be fair, and
you're
not
right. It's like to me, I agree with you. I wholeheartedly agree with you. The buck has to stop at the management, and I'm so sick. Should I do this right now or should I wait? I'm fucking done. Like, I'm sick of covering for Xbox. This industry as a whole would lose nothing by losing Xbox. I'm sick of saying they're done. They're fucking done. Outside of the 360, they have been a shit show for this industry. Every fucking acquisition they have done, I silently would rage because I knew they were going to fuck it up. It's like Ninja Theory. I love Ninja Theory. Yeah. Like, honestly, Hellblade 2's, they'll probably disband them. They'll be done after Hellblade 2. And it's going to keep going. And I just, like, they have mismanaged everything from the Xbox One to the Series X. And I'm sick of people like I really feel like Xbox has been treated these kid gloves because we want them to succeed. We want them to. And it's like we've operated on all this potential year after year after year. And it's like, even looking at their lineup, Ryan McCaffrey, who is a prominent Xbox guy with IGN, he's like, really on a down year for Sony, and Nintendo really has decided to punt 2024. Xbox finally has all these games and they're not doing anything. I'm like, what fucking games? Where are the games? We're 5 months into of 2024. They haven't released anything. Are you talking about Avowed? Avowed looks like your double A game. Indie, that's going to come to PlayStation in the near future. And that's the other aspect that we're not talking about. All these fucking games are going to come to PlayStation. They just are. Like the Starfield Special Edition, that's coming to PS5 Pro. So, like, what are we doing at this point for Xbox? What is the future? Game Pass is dead. It doesn't make money. That model is broken. I said it for years. And they're losing money hand over fist, and they fudge the numbers because they don't release it. So, you know what? I'll just hand it off to you. But there was a recent meme about basketball, how they're done with the 90s. Yo, we're done with Xbox. I'm done with it. They're dead to me. And it's funny because they did so much well in the 360 era. They just so much.
I argue the 360 era is where it actually all went very badly wrong for the industry, because they changed the PR for that era was got the golden years, but the actual reality of what they did, because like all the reality of like how much money they lost on the 360 only came out when the Xbox One came out, and that was why they were shifting to television. They didn't tell anyone that when they were doing the 360.
And they shit on Don, who Don was a fucking idiot. But they were able to, and I wrote about this, how they passed it on to Don, and then Phil was this bright bulb. But Phil hasn't done anything.
No.
And well, that's a lie. He has done something. Game Pass was his thing, and it's been an utter failure. So
Right. So this is the point: is that Matt Booty is dealing with the legacy of the guys before him, and whilst yes, it is hypocritical in the sense that he's changed his tune. I actually kind of respect that he's actually kind of gone, actually, this was wrong. I'm not doing it the right way. This is what we need to be focusing on. And he's right. The other thing with Hi-Fi Rush, though, is it wasn't a cheap game. That was not an indie game. That was a really big game in terms of its, the amount of work that went into it, the number of people working on it. It wasn't small. Just because it was kind of pitched as this kind of like kooky, funky little game doesn't mean it was cheap. Helldivers 2 is not a cheap game. It's a small game, but it took them 8 years to make, and they already had to reboot development once. So it's what we're getting is actually how do I put?
Well, I'll just add this little tidbit. Tom Warren, he's quoting a Wall Street Journal article about Game Pass, and here's a snippet. Mr. Spencer was at the center of pushing this strategy forward. In meetings, Mr. Spencer's staff would present arguments of why Game Pass wouldn't work. Publishers wouldn't participate, or it would eat into profits. Recalled Mr. Irving, the former Xbox staffer. But Mr. Spencer wouldn't relent. He wouldn't take no for an answer, said Mr. Irving, who was present at those early meetings. He was always trying to find a way to make it work.
Right.
And that's just an aspect. And in terms of the closures, which makes it even more damning, Arcane Austin and Tango were trying to pitch sequels at the time of their cancellation.
Yeah.
They were still operating on the assumption that they were studios that were going to continue. And it's just that is a tough sell, man. That's a tough sell.
So Ollie, here's a question for you.
Sorry, yeah, because the look on your face is like, oh God, just shut up.
Well, no, but
yeah, sorry, my apologies.
What's okay? So Game Pass is here. It's not going away anytime soon necessarily. Maybe they'll cancel it and out of the blue. But how do you take? Is there a way forward for Game Pass to be a sustainable part of the Xbox ecosystem, but in a different format or a different implementation?
I think it's kind of the way that Nintendo Switch Online kind of works, which is it's about making older games accessible in that kind of way. That works for Nintendo. You're not actually expending much money on the development because those games have already been made. You're just basically re-releasing older games and making them accessible. To be honest, a lot of these people haven't played. I mean, one of the things about Nintendo Switch Online, like a lot of the different things, is a lot of people haven't played like the original Zeldas, and you can do that. So it's. I think if Game Pass is going to survive at all, it's going to be kind of more of this retro, like the 360 back catalogue made work on. I mean, they kind of do that already a bit in Game Pass, but that's kind of, to my mind, what it should be.
It certainly seems like it can't be day one releases of
it cannot be
9 games. Like that can't possibly be sustainable.
Sorry, but don't you think if they pull that out, people will revolt? Like it'll be a full on, like that's been their business model. They sold Game Pass on the back of day and date.
No. I mean, it's not going to be. I think that's the only way that Game Pass could survive. I'm not saying that people wouldn't be absolutely
like people will be pissed, but there has to be there's going to have to be changes. Yes. I mean, there's going to have to be.
I think over time, what you're probably going to see is fewer newer games and fewer big budget games at launch on Game Pass because it's just financially not viable to do it that way.
And do you think that includes launching these games on other platforms?
I don't know.
Depends
about
on
that.
the series. I think that the model for that should be similar to what PlayStation does, at least with I think PlayStation's made a good decision to start releasing stuff on PC at least. But they don't do it right away necessarily.
Yeah.
So you still have that draw of the console, and then you release it a year later. I think that's
I don't mind having like stuff that was like an Xbox exclusive, like Titanfall available on PlayStation, like 2-3
down the road. I think that's a good idea. I think timed exclusives for consoles makes a lot of sense.
Yes.
I think that big stuff like Call of Duty should remain multi-platform.
Yes.
But if you have Game Pass, you get a perk. Like you get the Season 1 Battle Pass for free.
Yeah.
Or you get like X amount of this or that, XP tokens, la-da-da. You get a little package every month. You know, like there's all these different services where you get little perks every month. Well, that you can apply that to Game Pass without giving away Call of Duty, and also I think it's great. Like Starfield was a great example we talked about a minute ago. That should not have been given away for free
That's
to act on Xbox. That should have been, or at least if they were going to give it away for free on Xbox, they still needed to sell it on PlayStation because it's crazy to just to have no sales of a game.
And it's like this business dichotomy. Like one has lagged behind the other all the time, and it's like what you just said typifies because they were going to like. It's like the Satya Nadella versus the Phil, and Phil sold Satya on this vision that hasn't worked in any capacity, and you can feel this struggle. But it's almost like the struggle didn't win out before it really would have mattered, because if like you walk back the day and date thing, Xbox gamers are going to be pissed, and they're going to lose people bad because they've already conditioned people to accept. Like they've devalued.
Oh no! There's going to be a massive fallout. I'm not saying that there's not going to be.
No, I'm not saying you're saying there isn't. It's just like, to what extent? Because their business model is predicated on Game Pass at this point. They have forgone game sales. Game sales are like irrelevant. A lot of game publishers at all these shows these years, whether it's PAX or anything, there's like, why are we even releasing on this platform at this point? It doesn't make any sense. Because our games aren't selling, unless you're.
Well, it's going to have to be a slow change. I mean, like Ollie was saying, like I think that they're going to have to stop with specific games. They're going to have to stop giving it away on day one, and people are going to be like, "Wait, why isn't it day one?" And they're just going to have to deal with that.
You think they can survive doing that?
Yeah, absolutely. They're going to go through.
I don't survive because Microsoft has unlimited money. They can float this boat for as long as they want. I'm just talking as an initiative. Let's just pretend Xbox is a thing that needs to make money to survive. Okay.
The problem with Microsoft having infinite pockets is not the issue. The problem is other people that try and release games on Game Pass, and is that financially viable for them? And the answer is it's not. That's the problem, and this is why Game Pass can't work long term in its current format. And just to go back quickly to Hi-Fi Rush, check the credits. There's no way that was an indie game. There are hundreds of people that made this.
And it's funny, it's that dichotomy. It's the lower price point promoted after the fact as a smaller game, but it wasn't a smaller game. I agree with you, Ollie. Yeah,
it's massive. So I mean, it's bigger than some of the. Like, I worked on Gears of War, and the team on this was bigger than that. So I mean, I mean, it was also an Unreal Engine game. But I'm seeing lots of familiar names as well, which is kind of funny.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry, my apologies. Sorry,
I think that it's going to be a PR. It's going to be difficult for them from that standpoint, but it's like there's not really another way forward.
But we talked about this with Cog when we had him on, and my point was like, I asked him, I'm like, do you think they went full bore on Game Pass before they needed to? And he said it was a good question. I mean, it was kind of rhetorical. It's just, I mean, I will maintain they did. And I honestly think they are over the precipice at this point.
Right, yeah.
You're going to try to walk it back. Eric, you're completely right. They're going to do it, and they're going to do it soft.
Well, they're going to start with Call of Duty. That's my prediction. And Call of Duty won't come to Game Pass.
Otherwise,
and then from there, that will set the stage for other stuff.
They are forfeiting hundreds of millions of dollars.
They can't release Elder Scrolls 6 on Game Pass for free and not sell it on Sony and give it away on PC. And they just can't do that sort of thing. Like,
no, it's because if Game Pass, their goal was for Game Pass to just balloon, and it hasn't ballooned. That's the problem.
It would have to balloon so much. I mean, it would have to get so big. And I think there's value in Game Pass done the right way. And I think it could be a great service, and it could bring people in.
The value is unarguable. Like, the value to gamers is unarguable. But
I think you have to make it sustainable, though. Yeah, and I think that you can still.
But I just argue gamers don't, like, people equate this with film and Netflix. People don't consume games in the same way. I remember having this conversation. I don't view gaming as a value proposition. It's a premium hobby to me. I'm in at the price point.
It's not that it's like Netflix in terms of the actual market. It's the business model they copied. That's the problem. And you're right, it's not actually compatible with video games.
No, it's not.
On top of that, the only way that model would work is if every single person who had an Xbox had Game Pass.
Right.
That's the only way it works in any way financially viable way, and it's not. It's like a tiny proportion
Yeah,
of
like
the overall install.
your default of being an Xbox person was a Game Pass person.
Yes,
Like you had to have Xbox to play on Xbox.
I mean, the number of people that have Xbox and don't have Xbox Live is also enormous. So Xbox Live is not everyone. And again, Xbox Live is still incredibly expensive to maintain because the server backend is enormous. So a lot of the things that we have that's a problem in the industry is we don't have visibility outside of gaming, outside of the industry, on what's actually happening. This is also why it's very frustrating when people talk about how well a game has done, let's say like Hi-Fi Rush, and they don't disclose how much it costs to make. We don't know how much it costs to make, but you can look at the credits and you can see hundreds of people, and those people didn't work for free.
Yeah.
So you know that there's an enormous cost going on, and it's not being divulged. At least,
but I think that creates the dissonance there, right? Where people are like, well, wait a minute, why'd you cancel this studio? Why did you close down the studio that made this game that you guys said was so successful? Whether or not it was successful, that's irrelevant because it's Microsoft saying this is a success. It's getting nominated for Game of the Year. It's got all this hype, and then they close the studio, and you're like, well, wait a minute, like you guys were telling us one thing, and now you're doing something else, and it's very confusing.
This is why
it's very disorienting.
Right, and Jason's right in the fact that it looks very hypocritical because it is.
It does.
And the reason why it's hypocritical is because what they're telling you initially is normally a lie. And what they're actually saying is the truth is actually, it doesn't work. And that's the truth.
But so I guess, you're talking about Hi-Fi Rush, but they're trying to frame Arcane Austin as the studio that did Redfall, that they had a big hand in. Arcane Austin also did Prey. They also did Dishonored, which are...
No, that wasn't Arcane Austin. That was Arcane Lion.
Well,
they had part, but didn't they had a part in these games? Like
but the thing is that's another thing is with things like what is it, Dishonored, and what was the other one you mentioned?
Prey.
Right. That was a different.
We don't know what the budgets for those were.
Fair enough.
And this is
it was also pre-Microsoft.
I mean, from what I know, is like there are some games that.
But I guess the argument comes is like all these games are critical darlings. Let's just agree on that, right?
Not Redfall.
No, Dishonored, Prey, Hi-Fi Rush.
That doesn't really mean
it. Does not,
but they didn't close down all of Arcane. So those games doesn't matter.
No,
the people who made Dishonored haven't been closed down.
But it's like, and then you hear guys, the only thing you've heard chiming in on this from a lot of the industry. And this is different than a lot of studio closures. Like people keep talking about the PlayStation closures of Studio London. Well, Studio London, they hadn't made games in years. Like this is not the same animal. It's not the same thing. I'm not trying to let PlayStation off the hook for this.
And that's a very big difference because those are what are called first-party studios. Arcane, Tango were studios that were acquired that existed before they became first-party. Mm-hmm. The whole point of a first-party studio is actually not to actually make profitable games. It's to actually push the hardware to show everybody else in the industry this is how you use.
This is the example we set. Yes,
right.
And Studio London, for example, is one of them that they weren't even being utilized. So that's
but this is the thing is people don't have visibility on what they were working on because they were supporting other games.
Yes, so you're right. They were a supportive studio, and they thought they consolidated them. It's not the same thing in terms of the PlayStation closures versus the Xbox closures. Which are
no. So the PlayStation closures, I actually think are so the Xbox closures are error correction on overspending. Whereas the PlayStation closures are just stupid. And specifically the ones in Japan and...
Yes, the Japan studio closure, it is... I completely agree with you.
I mean, and the UK studio also work very closely with the Japanese studio as well. They're part of the same sort of development structure. So it's not one or the other, but they've got rid of all of their internal development, which for a first-party platform holder is absolutely idiotic.
We can theorize about Jim Ryan's influence about a lot of things, but the Japan Studios thing is definitely a Jim Ryan finger.
No. That's actually not. So that really? I know more that I shouldn't talk about this, but I know.
Well, no, you got to say it now.
No, I can't. But there's a lot.
Well, tell me as much as you can then.
I can't tell you anything, is what I can say.
Oh
But all I
God,
can say is no.
because like these games are like my life. I love these games.
So the thing is there's a lot of territorial, narcissistic politics going on in Tokyo in general, and the Japan studio was part of that fallout. Is all I'll say. It wasn't specifically to do with Jim Ryan, but Jim Ryan absolutely would have rubber stamped that and said, "Yeah, let's go," because all he cares about is like, how much money are we making, kind of thing. He doesn't really care about the kind of the game and what you're actually doing. At least Andrew House understood that you actually need to have both parts of that. Yes, you have to have make money, but in order to make money, you have to invest in the creative craftsmanship of this medium.
Ollie, you keep mentioning Andrew House, who isn't.
One thing I did disagree with him on though was he shouldn't have.
You keep mentioning Andrew House as like as an integral part. Like, what is his position now?
Oh, he's not really involved anymore. I think he might have even retired. I think.
Because he was. I liked Andrew. He was charismatic where Jim wasn't when he was the head of.
I don't know. I wouldn't say Andrew House was charismatic.
Well, maybe it was his accent. Like, I find your accent sexy as fuck. So I don't know. Maybe it's.
Okay. Okay. I'm now very self-conscious. The thing with Andrew House, he was actually a very understated guy. The reason why I like him so much, partly because obviously he really kind of got what PlayStation was about, was he was at Sony forever, right?
Yes.
And then he also dealt very much with the Japanese side as much as he did with the European side. But the thing that kind of I thought was saddening was around about Andrew House's time, PlayStation was mostly run out of California. And it was shifting away from Japan to California, which I thought was a mistake. And Andrew was kind of the only kind of link back. The only mistake I thought he did was basically Death Stranding and making Hideo Kojima a first-party studio. I thought that was a mistake.
That was an Andrew House decision?
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't say Andrew House. I mean, so you've got to understand, it's like the management, there's like a group of them, and then they all kind of discuss it, and then let's go with this. And it's not normally one person that makes one big decision, unless it's someone that's really bullish about certain things, like you have with Phil Spencer and Game Pass. But as it said, his team also pushed that as well. So it's not just one guy. But Jim Ryan's a bit different because he's very bullish. This is the problem. Whereas Andrew House was much more like, what does everyone else think? He's much more of one of those
delegation.
Yeah, but I mean, every good CEO manager.
Sure, you have to.
You have to have.
If you know when to delegate, you have to know when you take control. Yeah.
Right. I am worried about Eric's facial expression because it looks like he wants to kill himself.
No. I need to go soon. So I need to wrap this up.
Oh, okay. But yeah, so, I mean, the whole thing to answer is that they basically, it was kind of that whole era was basically kind of being true to what PlayStation was, and what we're dealing with now is sadly not that at all. Thankfully that era is now ending, and there's going to be a new Japanese guy that takes over from Jim Ryan. So I think it's going to kind of shift more back to Japan again, which I actually generally think on the whole is a good thing. Though there are obviously going to be problems with that, because from a technical standpoint, Japan is still really, really, and a creative standpoint, is still really behind. I mean, that's the thing I've told Eric loads of times, is like the biggest secret of the Japanese games industry of the last 15 years easy is that the reason why they've gotten, or they've caught up, is like the open secret is the number of international staff that work in Japanese game development.
Last time we spoke, you really opened my eyes to that. Yeah,
Hi-Fi Rush is a good example. I mean, it's not a bad game, but the director of that was an American guy, I think. So, and they have a lot of international staff at Tango Gameworks. Or they did.
Well, and you mentioned Andrew House bringing Kojima into the fold, but I mean, the start of that was Konami. Right. And Kojima butting heads, around the time of.
To be fair, like Kojima is not somebody I should really talk about because
we don't have to. But he's one of those guys in the gaming industry.
Why is that?
The auteurs,
he takes credit for stuff he doesn't do.
I agree with you, and it's funny because you won't find a bigger Kojima fan than me. But I am the guy that also defends Konami because there's two sides to every story, and I don't mean to think. But like Metal Gear Solid 5 was over budget, past schedule, and it's like we never get the full story of the whole thing. And we only get the Jeff Keighley, I'm going to blow him on the stage of the Game Awards, bow down. And listen, Kojima deserves a lot of that. I mean, I'm not going to blow him, but it's just like he is every bit of that. But like
He's
the
good at
guy
selling
isn't
his product.
infallible. He's not infallible.
So
Like,
the
it
thing
sounds
about
like Metal Gear Solid 5 and 4 were fuck ups.
so the thing is like there was a saying in Japan in the industry that Winning 11, which is like the massively successful football game that Konami
Yes,
made,
yeah.
Winning 11 made Konami its money, and Kojima
Mhm.
spent it.
Fair enough.
And
I can
basically,
see it.
and from and it's from about Metal Gear Solid 3 onwards where the bloat in terms of budget started to happen, and he just used to spend money like crazy.
Yeah.
Metal Gear Solid 4 lost money, I heard, and then Metal Gear Solid 5 was a massive financial like black
Yeah.
hole.
It
And
was so delayed. It was so
and this was also why they had to release Ground Zero.
yeah. Ground Zeroes was a direct product of being over budget and over time. Yeah,
And on top of that, they had Metal Gear Solid Survive, which was released after Metal Gear Solid 5.
on the assets.
And the reason that got released was so that they could just break even on the spending.
Yeah.
And that game did actually sell decently for what it was. So they actually did okay overall. But that was the reason. I mean, it really was about budgetary spending. Like Kojima he just went overboard. Like everybody talks about this. Like,
and now Kojima's doing film and TV,
Oh
and
my
with
God.
all
But
he's
the thing
getting
is,
his
it's like-
dream. I mean, he's working with Elle Fanning. You know, there's a girl at my local Tim Hortons. She's a redhead, but she looks just like Elle Fanning. And I'm gonna. She's a young girl, and I don't want to. I don't want to be like a creep, because I don't mean to say it as a creep. I just want to say, like, you remind me so much of Elle Fanning. But hey, she will think I'm a weirdo, and she'll probably ban me from the Tim Hortons for saying that. Eric, how do we like? Is Xbox done? What are we saying here?
I don't think
not.
Xbox is done.
No.
I don't think Game Pass is done. I think they're going to change the Game Pass thing. There'll be a massive kickoff pushback about when they start pulling all the major releases from that.
Yeah.
But that's going to be a gradual thing because they want to kind of dial it back. I mean, they have to do that.
Eric, what do we do? What do we do with management for Xbox?
Well, there's always the guillotine.
Yeah, La France.
But I think that's true.
We could go borrow some protesters from the universities and send them over to Xbox
Jesus Christ
headquarters.
No, but we are going on a hunger strike. It's our human right.
We don't really do anything about management. They will continue to be management.
Yeah,
we should make a game about
that. Sounds like a Fallout statement.
Yeah, it is. It's still they're going to be in the cryopods, and we're going to be up on in the nuclear fallout. So no, I mean, I think that management they learn too late, and it looks like Microsoft's maybe starting to take the first shift in a tectonic shift that's going to have to happen. And Sony, I don't know, they're going to continue to cannibalize themselves, and Nintendo will do the Nintendo thing. And I hope the Switch 2 is better than the Switch, because I can't stand that thing.
I can't abide that. No.
So Eric,
I understand why.
Eric, do you have to go?
I do have to go. Yeah.
Is it okay if Ollie and I carry on for another 20 minutes?
If you guys want to, yeah. I don't know how that will work.
If you just have to bow out and leave it hosted. That's it.
Running the thing.
Let's just talk about games we're playing, and that's about it.
I think since I have to do some stuff on my computer, I'm gonna have to end it. You guys could start another one.
No, it's right. We'll finish it this time.
I think we should let's do a part 2 next time.
Yeah,
maybe let's do that. Because we can just there's lots more to talk to. We can get into Nintendo and why the Switch is so bad. And see, we're setting the stage for.
I just wanted to sing the praises of Final Fantasy 16 and why it's the game of the year 2023.
Well, we'll have to do that next time. Maybe I'll play a little bit more of it before then.
But the Rising Tides DLC, I was going to say, the Rising Tides DLC is absolutely fantastic. It changed the dynamic of the game so many ways.
Well, I'll have to pick it up. And I'd like to talk about other stuff like Stellar Blade, which we didn't get to.
Yes, that was
we have some stuff to talk about next time. Next week if you guys can make it next week, I can do it.
Yeah, let's do next week. Ollie is going to be mainstay.
We'll do part 2, part B.
And
all right. Well, yeah. Let's wrap it here. But
I got the music thing right.
Okay. Yep.
On that note, I expected to talk about it, but the music selection I have is from the Rising Tide DLC for Final Fantasy 16. Nice. And it is very special to me because the Final Fantasy 16 release, the announcement of the game came with a song in the announcement trailer that was never included in the retail release. And I was extremely disappointed. And it turns out so many people were that they campaigned Soken, Masayoshi Soken, about the song so much that he included it in the Rising Tide DLC in the final fight with Leviathan. And I'm over the moon that it was included because it was so good. It got everybody hyped for this game, and then it was never in the main game, and then it's finally in the DLC. And everyone should play it. It is incredibly hype, and I hope you enjoy. Please enjoy.
All right, so next week or next episode, we'll talk about Nintendo. We'll talk about Stellar Blade. We'll talk about Final Fantasy. Thank you guys for watching, listening, whatever, and we'll catch you next time.
And Robot Cox.
And Robot Cox, that's right. The new name of our podcast, Robot Cox.